It's a new week in the shop and we're continuing to thrash on Elsworth. Tonight we're going to be working on clearancing the cheap eBay headers that I picked up for this Ford FE390. I've gotten a lot of questions about these headers. Guys, they were dirt cheap. They're the cheapest ones I could get on eBay. They do not fit. They have to be clearanced, and that's what we're going to be getting into tonight. Once we've got them clearanced, we're going to start on the exhaust system. I'd like to get this exhaust system at least stubbed back past the cab so that we can start to get the cab mounted down permanently. If I can at least get all the pieces that go under the cab tacked up and in place, then we can pull the exhaust system, weld everything up, and finish out the back half once we pull the bed off. That's the goal for this week. That's what we're gonna try and get accomplished. Let's go take a look at what we got going on. First things first, I've got the transmission mount pulled, I've got the engine mounts pulled, I've got my headers in on both sides. Now the first thing to note is you will see that this is not touching on the bottom of the exhaust flange down here, and that's because we are contacting the bell housing here. So we're gonna have to clearance this header enough so that this thing can rotate down into place and bolt up solidly up to the exhaust head, the exhaust flange of the head here. That's number one. Number two, we're contacting with the suspension here. Now, rotating this in might help clearance that a little bit, but we're still gonna need to add some extra clearance there. The third issue on the passenger side is that it's currently contacting the rubber of the engine mount. Now, that's not that big of a deal. We'll just shave that off, but there's not really any clearancing we're gonna have to do on the header itself. The passenger side is by far the worst. We'll come around to the driver's side here. Now, this is not fully set in place, but when it is, we've got clearance all the way around. It gets kind of close up here on the QA1 engine mount, but we are slightly contacting, you can hear it there, we are contacting the bell housing down here. So we've got to make that same clearance mark down here. I'm going to grab a Sharpie. I'm going to mark out the areas in which we need to clearance both of these headers. I'm going to start on the passenger side since that's the worst one. And I'm just going to mark those areas up, heat them up red hot with the torch, and knock them in with a hammer. And we're going to see if we can't get enough clearance. Now, that's a little bit of a bummer because we've got this nice finish on here, but I've already dinged these things up a little bit just trying to get them in place. It's so tight in here with this FE engine and the QA1 suspension. I think any header you purchase is going to be a little bit of a nightmare, especially when you're going with an aftermarket bell housing, potentially different heads on your motor, aftermarket suspension. Like, once you start changing all these things, the odds of getting your headers to fit successfully on the first shot are probably slim, but that's exactly what we're running into here. So knowing that I was probably gonna have to modify the exhaust, I didn't wanna go with an expensive set of headers. So we went with the cheap eBay ones. We'll see how they work. But I do think I'll be able to clearance these enough to get them into place. Now, the other thing I've purchased is a Power Master starter here. Now, this is a small clockable starter. I'll actually give you the part number for this because in researching these starters, there is one for an FE engine block that has all of the terminals on the inverse side. And if you look how close the starter is to the engine block, I don't know how the heck you would attach any of those wires on the inverse side. This one is marked as being for a 427, but not necessarily for a Ford FE on PowerMaster's website. It does work with the Ford FE engines. The part number on this one is 9506M. 9506M. And that's going to give you the proper orientation of the terminals here, and it gives us plenty of clearance for the header here. I don't think I would be able to remove this starter with the header. I might be able to. I might be able to take the bolts out and kind of shimmy it down out the bottom here, possibly. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we've got plenty of clearance on the starter, right? I can get my whole hand back behind here. So I'm not overly worried about cooking the starter with these headers. We've got plenty of clearance there for that. So yeah, guys, other than that, I think it's just time to get to it here. We'll mark up all of our contact points and we'll start knocking in these headers. have a little bit of play in where this header can sit, because I've only got 2 bolts in it right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw the rest of the bolts in, because depending on where this sits, we either have clearance or we're contacting. So I'm gonna go ahead, get this thing bolted down and see how close we are. Now I have improved our clearance up here. I might have just a little bit of refinement because we're pretty close to one of the bolts up there, but it's darn near spot on. So really the only other area is back here by the bell housing. And the only other concern I might possibly have is coming off the front cylinder here. I had to cave this collector in pretty far, and that's the open end of that primary tube there. That's just basically blasting right in the back of the bell housing here. I'm hoping that's not going to restrict flow enough to cause any issues, but we're going to have to keep an eye on the temperature of that front cylinder just to make sure we are scavenging that exhaust out of there. I don't think it'll be an issue ultimately, because it's not like pinched off in there. It's just a restriction, and I've watched enough engine masters to hopefully know that that's not going to be a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the bolts in here and see if I need to do any more clearancing on this side. Okay, you can see now we've got the flange of the header actually tight to the head, which is great. However, it looks like we're still contacting the collector down there just ever so slightly. So I'm going to clearance that just a tiny bit more on the front edge. The back edge is clearing. So I'm just going to open up the back corner of that a little bit and give us a little bit more clearance on the bell housing right there, so we don't get any rattling or clattering once we're going down the road here. And that should do it for this side. Like I said, I think I might try and clearance this one bolt up here, but we still have, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch of clearance in there, so that's probably really not that bad. I did clearance this. I probably should have clearanced that first, because we gained a whole heck of a lot more clearance here than I thought we were going to. I may not have had to dimple this one. Ultimately, not a big deal. It would have been very, very close. It would have been very close to this bolt in this bracket down here, so I probably would have wanted to clearance that anyways. And like I said before, I did go ahead and trim back the rubber on the engine mount down in there. You can see a gap in there now where there was not one before. We got the headers in here. We got clearance everywhere. So we're cleared on the passenger side. We're cleared on the driver's side. That's great news. And we are ready to move on to fabricating the exhaust here. The first thing I'm going to do actually is cut off these flanges, and we're going to put V-bands on either side. I've got V-band clamps for the headers, and then eventually behind the X pipes, we'll put another set of V-bands, so it'll be kind of a two-piece exhaust system here. You'll have your headers, you have your mid pipe or X pipe, and then we'll have the back tailpipes. So technically 3, because there'd be 1 on each side, your middle mid pipe, and then your headers. That's the general idea I'm going for here. It should make it a little bit more serviceable, a little bit more easy to deal with. So we'll run our X pipe here, and then when we get to this point under this cross member, we're going to put hangers under this cross member here to hang that X pipe in this middle section here. It'll be attached at the headers, hung here, and then we'll have our tail portions with our mufflers. Our mufflers are probably, I don't know where they're going to sit. They're probably going to sit in here. So our hangers will be just behind our mufflers. And then the exit of the exhaust will feed out back. We'll either kick them out in front of the rear tires or out behind the rear tires. I don't know yet. We'll have to play with that a little bit and see what we've got room for. So the next step here, I'm going to pull these headers off. I'm going to get the flanges cut off them, and we'll get the V-bands welded on. So one of the tools I'm finding super helpful for this process are these 3D printed angle stencils, right? So I've got a 9 degree and a 15 degree angle finder here essentially. It gives you a stencil on how to cut out the tube to keep it from getting too far out of round. If you obviously cut these tubes, you don't get a good center cross section. You end up elongating the opening of the tubing, okay? So I had a situation where I needed something that was less than a 45, because the 45 doesn't work. And actually I can just show you this real quick. As I'm trying to mock up this X pipe, you can see these 45s. If I put a 45 in there, the angle's not quite right. So I need something that's less than a 45. You can see this overbends what we need. So what I did, or what I've been doing here, is I stacked 250's. I stenciled one out, and then I moved it down the pipe and cut another one out of the 45 bend to give us a 30-degree bend, something like that. And actually I'm fitting this for the other side, but I'll stick this up in here and you'll see, okay, we got a nice bend there, and it lines up pretty well over here on this end. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up another 30-degree bend for this side, and we'll get those tacked in place, and then we'll cut our straights to get our X pipe mounted. And that's where I'll probably call it for tonight until we come back a little bit later this week to finish off this exhaust. All right guys, it's a new night out in the shop here. I've got the whole truck torn apart, as you can see. And we're getting right back onto the exhaust here. So I've been sitting and staring at this for, I'm not gonna lie, probably too long, maybe about an hour or so here, just to kind of get figured out exactly how I'm gonna lay out the mufflers here. We've got a pretty tight space, especially with the QA1 conversion kit. And so I'm really struggling to figure out how I want to route the mufflers. I have a situation where I could actually push the X pipe up further and it would give me a few more options, but I think I finally found something that I'm okay with. So I've been using an angle finder here just to help me better understand at what angle I need to cut my bends and things like that. And what I came up here, I've got Black Widow Venom 250 mufflers here. These are offset mufflers, so it's a center inlet or outlet with an offset inlet or outlet depending on how you're going to use them. I'm going to use the offset on one side here, and I'm actually going to angle the muffler like this. I'm going to put it at about a 30-degree angle or so. We're going to set it back as far as we can, and that's going to put the outlet right in the middle of the opening of the torque arm brace and the side of the frame here. I think that's my best option. I tried laying it flat. I didn't like any of the options because if you put this in straight, you start running into a lot of things up here by the torque arm, and then you've got a really extreme angle here that we need to meet. So if I angle these just a little bit, so I angle them a little bit and I rotate them so they're at about, maybe a 45, 30-degree angle, somewhere in there like that. So it keeps the muffler tucked up high and away from the road. Actually, the muffler will still be above the frame and the lowest component of the suspension here. So we shouldn't bottom out on the suspension, so we shouldn't bottom out on the muffler or drag the mufflers. And then I can figure out how I want to do the outlet of the exhaust from up that way. So I've kind of figured out this is what I'm going to do on both sides. I'm going to run these at a slight angle. I'm going to run these at a slight angle, and I'm also going to rotate the mufflers up from not quite fully vertical, not quite fully flat, probably something like I said about a 45-degree angle or so. It gives us plenty of clearance and gives us a little bit better angle to get the exhaust to flow in the direction that we want here. Okay, that should kind of help hold things in place for the moment. It does have some flex in it, so we need to be just a little bit careful. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this just beyond where the support for the torque arm is, add in a V-band and on either side of the exhaust here, and that will allow me to install and remove the tips of the exhaust so we can kind of fish those into place, get them clamped in. And then the two mufflers, the X pipe and the pipes all the way up to the primaries of the headers have the V-bands on them, so that can all drop out in one piece. Now I am going to attempt to try to mimic the other side a little bit to the best of my ability. Because the drivetrain is offset, the exhaust is a little bit offset, so they're going to have to be at slightly different angles, but I really like symmetry myself. So that's why this offset drivetrain kind of bugs me a little bit, but it is what it is. That's the way Ford designed it. Not much we can do about that. I'll try and keep this looking as symmetrical as possible. Not that it really matters, because you're not going to really see any of this unless the truck was to go up on a lift, or you really were curious, you wanted to get on your back and crawl on the ground and take a look underneath. But I'll know, and so I'm going to just try and get this as symmetrical as I can. Now there's nothing really on this side of the truck that is stopping us. It's all wide open under here, so we've got a lot more room to play with. That side, the driver's side, is really the restricted side in this setup. So as I talked about earlier, I have these 3D printed 3-inch OD, one 9-degree, one 15-degree angle models here for our exhaust pipe. I'm going to actually start trying to find this angle, see if one of these is close. If one of them's close, I'll make it work. If that doesn't work, I'll use my angle finder and we'll cut up something custom. But since I have these to stencil out these angles, if I can make one of these work and keep it looking somewhat decent, that's what we're going to do. So we'll start with the 9-degree angle finder here. And I'm just going to lay this in. So 9 degrees is not nearly enough. I can already tell. We're going to jump right to 15 degrees. And I don't think that's going to be enough. Yeah, so it's going to have to be more than 15 degrees. Some combination of the two here. That's 24 degrees. Mocking all this stuff up is a little bit of a pain. because everything is so heavy and awkward. We're actually going to try that. I kind of like that. The cross member for the cab is very close to this muffler, so I may end up even having to run this almost straight like that just to get me the clearance I need, which I think that's what I'm going to have to do. It's all right. It's not terrible. I'll just estimate this here. About 25 degrees. About 25 degrees. So the combination of these two is 24 degrees. So we'll actually lay these out together and use that to cut up our angled piece here. And that's going to get us pretty darn close. I'll be sure to leave a little bit extra wide on the top side, and that should give me my extra 1 degree there. So I'm going to go ahead and get that angle cut up and see if we can't get something tacked up that looks halfway decent here. Okay, you guys can see I've got the mufflers mocked up. Again, you can kind of see I've got them at an angle. I wasn't able to get them exactly the same to get them ideally fit for each side. They're just because they're not symmetrical on the truck, I had to angle them just slightly different from one another. Not awful though, doesn't look too bad. The next thing I need to do, I need to put a little extension and a little bit of an elbow on this to bring this back to 90. And then I'm gonna put a V-band on each side. Once the V-band's on, then we can start looking at the exhaust exit here. And I'll kind of show you what I had in mind on this side. I've got a couple pieces. It's not exactly how I'm gonna do it, but it's a pretty good mock-up. On this side, you can see I've got a 90 tube. Let's see, which way can you see that? I've got a 90 tube that is coming out of the muffler and angling just below the frame here. And then I'll have an angled turn up. I'm gonna put a little bit more of a bend under the frame, but essentially what's happening is we're turning 90 out of the muffler, coming down below the frame, coming back up, and then angling the tip back down. I'm actually gonna angle this tip back a little bit like that so it points more towards the front of the rear tires. And we're gonna do something like that. And then eventually what I'll do is I'll put a hanger off of one of these bolts probably, and run that hanger right down to the pipe here so that the tips hang just like that. Now I'm not going to use the larger end of this 45. We'll do something where we've got just a straight cut 45, a straight cut tube here sticking out the side. The fenders on the bed sit right at just about the level of the frame back here. So I know as long as I keep the top of the tip below that, we won't have any interference from the fender there. So all should be well as far as that goes. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna start getting pieces cut and mocked up, because as soon as this is mocked up, I'm considering I might possibly throw the bed back on one more time before I weld everything up. But once it's mocked up and it's good, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna throw some extra tacks in all of the joints all along the way, just to make sure nothing shifts on me when I pull this all apart. I'm gonna put it up on the weld table and we're gonna weld up this entire system and then reinstall it. So that's how we're gonna finish this video out. I'm gonna get these tips mocked up and then we'll get this thing finally welded up and installed for good. All right, everything is tacked up. I've got my tailpipes all tacked up. Gosh, I actually think I did a pretty good job getting those fairly symmetrical, even though you're not going to see both of them at the same time because they're side exit. I think that turned out pretty good though. Pretty happy with that. Those are going to look, you're not even really going to see these. They're going to be up underneath the fender, which is just fine. I don't mind that at all. I just wanted to make sure we did get side exit exhaust, and I kind of wanted the exit to be in front of the wheel. Had I even wanted them to be in the back, it would have been a little bit of a nightmare. You guys can see just how tight it gets back here. We would have had to shoot the gap, come up and over the axle, and you're talking about 3-inch pipe in here already. It just would have got really tight really fast. It's doable. I think it could be done, but you're not going to have a ton of clearance between the rear differential, the exhaust pipe up to the bed. So well, this is the easier solution, and while I don't always advocate for taking the easier way out, the exhaust design doesn't make a huge deal to me. I usually do like running straight out the back. For this style Ford truck with the big tank in the back, it just wasn't quite gonna work out in this instance. The tightest clearance we've got quite a tight gap between our V-band and our torque arm brace, but I think that's gonna be just fine. I don't think that's gonna cause an issue there, especially once we've got the hangers put in place. So we're gonna have to put a hanger in for each muffler here, and then I think I am gonna throw one in just out of an abundance of caution for these tailpipes. We probably could get by just tightening up the V-band and letting them rip. All right guys, you can see I've got the exhaust hung back up in place. I've got the headers finally fully mounted up. Everything's clearanced, everything's welded up, everything's in place. I got my hangers on the mufflers back here. I decided against running hangers on the tips back here because we can get those V-bands pretty tight. If they end up coming loose on me, I'll end up throwing a hanger off of this bolt and down to the tip here, but it's such a short piece of pipe, I don't think that's gonna be a big deal. But that's gonna finish up the exhaust system. So the next thing I've got to do some brake line work. I've got to install the fuel lines, and we've got to do our modification for the fuel filler neck. And that's all gonna come up on the next couple episodes here. But we're inching closer to having everything on the chassis side completely done. I still need to do the front brakes as well, but by the time I get the brake lines plumbed, the gas lines plumbed, and the last couple odds and ends things finished up, we're gonna touch the frame up, and then once all that's done, we're ready to permanently mount the cab and the bed onto the truck for good, and I'm looking forward to that. You guys have been watching the last couple of videos. You've seen how many times the bed has come on and off this truck, the cab, the same thing. We've got the truck blown completely apart today, and I've got my dad here. He's gonna be helping me with a bunch of stuff through today, and we're gonna make some big progress on the truck this weekend. So as always, guys, you know the drill. If you don't work on your projects, they will not work on themselves. Get out in the garage, get building, and I'll see you on the next episode of Cody Builds.